Hello, everyone. My name is Elyze Davis. This is my grandmother, Addie Bell Stockton Goode, and this is my mother, Addie Marie Goode Davis. And we are here to talk about the Pettit family history. Mom?
The Pettit branch started in Texas, in Gonzales County, back when Texas was an independent republic, before we became a state in the United States. And of course, we know that there were many ins and outs in that endeavor. But we were here. We were slaves, but we were in Gonzales County, Welder, Texas, Mount Eaton Community. Then it was known as Hickston, Texas. The first member of the Pettit family that we know was Claire Baldridge. She was owned by the Pettits. Claire had 6 sons by her owner, and 2 of those sons remained in Gonzales County after emancipation, after we were freed from slavery on the 19th of June. You see, in Texas, we were not freed by Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. We were not freed until June. It wasn't that we didn't know about it, but we were not. We were not allowed to leave for fear of our lives. So I grew up on that very property where my people were slaves, and we own that property to this day. When slavery ended, Mr. Pettit gave Claire 6 acres of land with a cabin, a workman's cabin, on a hill. She lived there until she died. 2 of her sons, when they got grown, came to her. The father said the government couldn't tell him what to do with his own children, so he kept his 6 slave children just like he did his own 6 children by his white wife. The difference was he could actually, before emancipation, sell 6 of them, and the other 6 he could not sell because they were white. Lee Pettit, the oldest son of Claire, had 3 daughters. And when his dad left Gonzales County, he sold him 60 acres of land in exchange for a horse. It was a barter arrangement. He didn't take the horse when he left. But he did go to the county courthouse and record the sale so that the land was legally his, all 66 acres. And we still own that 66 acres of land. Now, of his 3 children, 2 of them each had 1 child. The oldest girl had Betty Stockton, and the middle girl had Constance Lee Stockton. Both of them had sisters for mothers and brothers for fathers. Papa Constance is who the son became, Constance Lee Stockton. Lived there on that land until he died. My mother still lives there, and we still work that land, have cattle on that land. So this has worked for us because we were taught how to care for a working ranch, which is just a farm in which your cash crop is cattle. And it can support you if you know how to do it. But we had no money. Lots of fruits, vegetables, lots of meat of every kind, but no money. We were poor when it came to money, but wealthy in needs. Our needs were met, and of course there was plenty of love because we had our great-grandmothers right there with us, grandfathers right there. It was a wonderful way to grow up. And my mother grew up running and playing on that land and then working and living there. Mama, you want to talk a little bit about Mount Eaton, growing up there?
Well, I was told my mother died when I was 8 days old. And my father didn't know what to do with this little 8-day-old baby. So he got word to his mother down in Mount Eden that he had this baby, and would she take me?
You were born in Fort Worth.
So she told him to bring me on down. She would. Well, she was married to Will Lee, and my dad brought me down where Will Lee accepted me, just like she did, to be her baby to try to raise. I was 3 weeks old, so I was told. Well, the milk that my father brought, a formula, they couldn't find it in Gonzales. So Will Lee said, well, you had a cow out there, you could milk her, and that would give me something to eat. And so that's what he did. He would bring that cow up and milk her in the middle of the day. So I'd have fresh milk, and then at night in the morning, he would milk her again. And they raised me on that cow's milk. I grew up to be right there. I went to school. Mount Eden had a church and a school. I joined that church, gone to that school and finished. Had lots of people in the community. Lots of children went to that school. My principal was Professor Hodges. His wife was a teacher, Mrs. Hodges. Had a good time growing up. I finished school. Well, I didn't want to go to college. I said, I'm going to get married. Well, I had looked at him before he left. He lived down the road from me. But he had gone into service. And so I was left there, not going to college, and I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. When he came back, for some reason, I don't remember why he came back,
He got out of the service.
but he got out of the service, and he was back, and he said, you broke up. You sure is good looking. And then, so we talked a while, and he said, don't you want to get married? And I said, yes, I do. So we got married on the front porch. That old house is still standing, that we married out on the front porch. And we had 6 children. I always wanted, I said if I had one, I was going to have 2. So sure enough, I had a boy first, which I was so proud of, Harding Jr. Then I had Addie Marie, which is here with me now. And Odessa, and Lily, Wayne, and Dolores. Dolores is the baby. And it was a hard struggle kind of. We had so many children, but he worked. My dad taught him how to work construction work on highways. That's what my dad did all of his working days. And Hoyt learned that work, and he worked in different towns away from home. He was gone a lot. I had to raise the children mostly by myself because he was gone off to make money to give to us to live on. And he was good. He would come home every Friday night. And we raised our 6 children out there in the Mount Eden community. And I'm proud of all 6 of my children. I lost 2 of them. Junior's gone and Odessa's gone. He lived in Houston, was married, and had 2 children. Odessa lived in Austin and had 1 child. And a husband, and he had a wife. So they are gone, but I have 4 children. I am proud of them. I have 2 in Houston and 2 in Dallas. So that's about the story of my life. I'm here with one of the daughters there, and I go back and go to Houston. I stayed out in Mount Eden in my old family house until a year ago. And I've been staying with a daughter in Houston, and I'll go back there this weekend. That's about the story of my life, I guess. I may have left out some things, but that's the biggest part.
Now we have pictures of the original Pettit family on the wall. I'll see if I can zoom in on it.
Yes,
Um,
I always like looking at that picture up at the top up there, because mom, she likes to tell stories about the Pettit family, and that's just kind of like a physical representation that I can look at.
can you point to them and see if we can say who each one of those people are?
Isn't the little boy Grandma's dad,
Yeah, that's Papa Cons.
Papa Cons, and then the man that kind of looks white, he
Lee
is
Pettit.
okay.
That's
and-
Lee Pettit,
what-
our progenitor, honestly.
Yeah, so he was the one. His father was the slave owner.
Right.
Okay.
And that's his wife.
The little dark-skinned
To his
woman
left.
at the bottom.
Right here, that's his
Uh-huh.
wife.
That's his wife, Betty Pettit. And then
Okay.
the oldest daughter is to the left, kind of faded because she had very white skin.
Okay.
Elyze Pettit. And then Jenny Lee on the far right side. And that's Aunt Hetty there with Papa Cons.
Oh, this is Aunt
That's
Hetty.
Aunt Hetty.
Okay.
Okay, I feel like I've met her, right?
Yes.
Like, we used to go over her house. Okay.
And to the
Up there on top of the hill.
Yeah.
and to the nursing home.
Oh, okay, so I remember her from the nursing home, but I remember her house. Y'all talking about her house on the hill. Okay. So,
So, yeah, and now when Lee Pettit's mother, Claire, had him, she lived in the house with her master.
That's correct.
With him and his wife.
Right. She lived in the big house with her master and his wife. The wife was English, and they described her as having raven black hair, deep blue eyes, and milk white skin. Claire, on the other hand, was very white skinned with freckles, light reddish blonde hair, and emerald green eyes. And she had the first child, Claire did. Lee Pettit was the oldest son, and that gave him privileges. And the wife would have a son, and she'd have a son. And the wife would have a son, and Claire would have a son. So there were 12 boys, 6 Claires and 6 by the wife. And they said if you lined up the 12, you could not determine which ones were black. They lived in a bunkhouse behind the spring house. The out kitchen, there was a kitchen not connected to the house.
The boys, that is.
The boys.
The black boys.
And the white boys.
Oh, okay. I
All
didn't
12
know that.
boys lived out there, and Lee was in charge because he was the oldest boy,
Even though he was black.
even though he was black.
Okay.
And Claire worked in the kitchen in the house, but spent lots of time out in the outer kitchen helping with cooking for the slaves. There were slave quarters further down where other slaves lived and worked the fields. And she was a slave, and she knew that. And when she was freed, what a day, what a day. And they taught my great-grandmother, which is Jenny, Hetty, and Eyelet, they're Lee's daughters, to never forget that day. What a wonderful day it was on the 19th of June when they could be free and walk away.
That was 1865.
1865.
And is there any indication of how the members of the family felt about the dynamic? Or I don't even know if they spoke about it much.
Well, he was their boss, their master, their owner. And he took 4 boys with him to Lavaca County, outside of Hallettsville, at a little place called Sublime. And those 4 boys, as they got grown, they married and stayed there, but they came back and forth to visit each other. And we, to this day, know their descendants.
Okay.
That's awesome.
That's something.
Yeah, that's good
Yeah.
that we still keep in touch.
Well, they carried the name Pettit
Yeah.
still. And Lee only had daughters. So that name went to Stockton, a whole nother branch of the family, which is just as interesting or more so.
Yeah. Okay. And now, the father Pettit, the slave owner, where was he from? Do we know?
I've heard that he came from Missouri, running from emancipation,
Okay.
because Texas was trying to go to Mexico, and Mexico would allow them to keep a slave for 7 years. Then nobody could be born in slavery. If they were born there, they were free. But he could only keep a slave for 7 years, and then he became a free man. Well, that didn't work for Texans. And Stephen F. Austin promised any man who came to Texas 80 acres for every slave he brought with him. That encouraged a lot of whites to come into Texas. Back then, they would get land by the section instead of by the acre. So you were isolated. This Mr. Pettit had 19 slaves. 16 of them were mulatto. So that probably tells you where he spent his time, free time.
Okay, and so I guess did the elder Pettit? What was his name again?
Lee Pettit.
Pettit. Okay.
And Lee Pettit could read and write a
no,
little bit.
His father.
Oh, I'm not sure. I think it was
slave.
John, the white man.
Yes.
I think his name was John, but I'm not sure
Okay.
about that.
Did he come after Stephen F. Austin made that pledge?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. But okay.
But Texas then tried to go back to the United States, but then emancipation happened,
Yeah.
and they tried to become an independent again, and then they sent half of Texas went off to fight in the war, and
Yeah.
half of them didn't want to go, and well,
Now, Lee Pettit, you just said he learned how to read. I know, was it illegal in Texas for slaves to
I
read
don't
at
know
that
that
time?
Texas passed any laws on it. He was allowed to learn that because he was the oldest son of this man, Pettit. And but nobody told him the importance of being consistent. If you look through his records, he sometimes spelled his name L-E-E.
Yeah.
Sometimes he spelled it L-E-A. Sometimes he spelled Pettit, P-E-T-I-T. Sometimes he spelled it P-E-T-T-I-T. So he was not consistent in that.
And that's not unusual for that time in history. A lot of people, black and white, did that. Because
Keeping your
writing
own
was
records instead of a government.
not common for common folk, even for non-slaves. But okay, so okay.
But due to this land and knowing how to operate it, they had maybe a little more than some other people back then at the end of slavery. And he owned a pipe, and he had tobacco, and on Saturday night he'd smoke his pipe. Well, there was a white couple, family, not far off, and something great happened to them, and they wanted to celebrate. And they sent and asked if they could borrow his pipe so they could smoke. I always thought that was interesting.
Did he give it to
He
them?
lent it to them.
Did he get it back?
I assume he did.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've always thought that it was great that we kept the land and the family, and that you all were taught, how to live off the land and the importance of keeping it over the generations. So I always thought great things about
And
that.
it's interesting that John Pettit, I guess that if that's his name, didn't take it from him or anything, or didn't leave him with nothing. He took care of him. It seemed like he might have loved his sons. I don't know if he loved what was
Claire
Pettit. Maybe he
that
loved
probably
her
wasn't
in
love.
I don't know, in a certain way, maybe not enough to. I don't know. But yeah.
Well, he couldn't have two wives.
Yeah.
She was his slave. He had to let her go. And I assume he
she's-
let the other 18 go as well.
And she
She
clearly
meant-
wanted to leave.
Yes,
she was happy
yes.
to leave.
She wanted. Everybody wants to be free.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be a slave.
Do we know if any of the other slaves in the area kind of stayed and lingered? Do we know of any other families?
Oh yes,
That
there
were
were
in the
slaves
area?
in that area. Sure,
Uh-huh.
we know the Jameses.
Okay.
They were Boyds when they came out of slavery, and they changed their name from James Boyd to Boyd James.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. Some other families that were in that area at the time. Harris's,
Yeah.
they were there.
There's some walkers.
Slaves there. And Walkers were slaves there.
Well, I
The
guess
Crawfords.
Yeah.
I guess were the Goode slaves there as well?
No,
Oh.
no, they were not. The Goods came from Hallettsville. You know, that's where the Pettits went. Actually, they came up out of Florida with Osceola
Okay.
and stopped off there with some slave women and had children. And then later went on with some to Osceola out in Indian Territory, which I think now maybe Oklahoma somewhere. They went to Del Rio and over into Mexico, and then they'd come back to Hallettsville, back and forth. That was Sandy Goode, long, long time ago. But Elroy Goode, the grandson of Sandy Goode, went to Guadalupe College in Seguin, and there he met Mary Elizabeth Ball, going to college. Slavery had just ended, and there they were going to college. And they married. He was in divinity school, called to preach, and the church down at Mount Eden called him to preach. And that's how they got to Mount Eden with the name Goode. We were told that it was German, and that's why it was pronounced Goode instead of good.
Okay. Now the Pettits, the white Pettits moved to, what was it?
Hallettsville, Lavaca
Hallettsville,
County.
And the black Pettits stayed there with the land and worked it.
2 sons. He took
Okay.
4 sons with him to Lavaca.
Oh, for the black sons. Okay. Okay.
And he gave property to them when they left Lavaca. They went to West Texas, and we kind of lost contact with them. But in my lifetime, one of the descendants of his came through looking for us, and we were at town, and he wanted to see the cemetery, and he got some erroneous information. He went on to Hallettsville. I don't know who he was or whatever happened to him. Yeah.
Interesting.
Because there was a cemetery. It was then on what we call the Booski property, or maybe the edge of the Crawford. And they buried whites on one side and blacks on the other side. Yeah, and of course the whites had better tombstones. The blacks mostly had rocks with stuff scratched on them.
Yeah. Now our white Pettit family, do they? What are they like now? What are they? Do they have any wealth? Are they middle class or? And
I have no idea.
I guess they're still nice to us.
I don't know where they are. No, we have no contact.
Oh, okay.
Don't know where they are or who they are.
Okay.
But it's amazing that all this history's been passed down, like throughout the generations. I think it's really awesome that not only do you tell us this information was told to you all throughout the generations. So I know you all were super close with like your grandmother and your great grandmothers. Y'all were always helped raised by them.
And Papa Consu was my namesake.
Mm-hmm. So, but
Anything else we want to go over?
Well, that land was full of things that helped people to survive. Indians were thick in that area, and of course white people ran them off. But the Indian orchards, which had peaches and plums of different varieties, the pecan trees, they fed people. That kept people going. Onions, shallots that grew on the creek bank, Cushaw, which now in the store it says Crenshaw, grew there. Good stuff to eat, This helped to keep people alive. And Indians for many generations came back across out of Mexico and would dig up stuff they had buried. I don't know how they could find it, but they would, and get stuff. Arrowheads were on the place, and I'm sorry that I can't tell you where they are, because my great aunt said she could have picked up a water bucket full, and this was in my lifetime. But I wasn't interested, and we didn't go see where they were.
wow.
Huh. And I guess nowadays Indians don't really.
Oh no. In later years, see, I guess when my mother was a child, they fenced all that property off. So they couldn't get back to it, and they worked it. It was clear. You could see a person coming from a great distance.
Well, I know that you enjoy going back. You're going back to your reunion this weekend, and that's
High school reunion.
high school reunion.
That's in Welder, Rathbunch High.
Going back to where you grew up, so that'll be fun.
Well, thank y'all for sharing our family history. I got a lot out of it. I hope you enjoyed telling it.
Yes,
We
and
did.
thank you
Very
so
much
much
so.
for your time, Grandma, Mom,
And this
my
is the-
brother, my dad sitting off to the side as well.
This has been the Davis family Pettit branch, coming live from Oak Cliff. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.